The panel discussion coming up next at 2 o'clock Central European Time. We have three gentlemen that are going to reflect on the personalization of rewards. We have today with us both Michael, Pieter, and Ross, and I would like to ask them to introduce themselves, and let's do that in an alphabetical order. So please introduce yourself and make your main statement for let's say around 3 minutes, and then we have a free flow format. So I would really like to ask you, and when I say you, is the audience, to ask as many questions as you like, and if not, I will be asking them. So this will not be a boring 1/2 hour. So may I give the floor first to Michael, because you're lowest in the alphabet.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here today. Been involved in reward for, almost 35 years across the world. So with respect to the topic, I'm sure my colleagues might or may not agree, but it's important to have a debate, is that really you need to think about the evolution of reward over a period of time. So we've gone from benefit statements to total comp statements, but now it's very much around personalized reward. And as you know, what's in vogue today is what we call employee personas. So I guess where I'm trying to come at this angle is, if you think about, first of all, your total reward strategy, and then within the context of total reward, what are the elements, and then to which audience, and what level of specificity do you wish to convey to those different personas. I've used in my professional life, Gen X, millennials, boomers have a different topography in the way in which you want to express and engage people around their personal reward journey. And it shifts, as we know, dramatically. A boomer, let's say, is more interested in pension, retirement. Millennials probably more interested in cash and buying a house. So how you shift that modality based on persona, I think, has a big shift in terms of how you land it well with your audience. So that's a very quick summary, but I thought I'd just put it out there. So I'll stop and then let it go to one of my colleagues.
Can you also share what your current role is and where you work?
Yeah, I'm based in London. I work for Flutter, which is the largest betting gaming group in the world, and worked in 9 countries and worked in 6 other very large public companies.
Thank you so much. Pieter, you're up next.
Thank you. So, hi everyone, happy to be back. So my name is Pieter. I'm originally from Belgium. I'm currently in Milan, in Italy, where we have the headquarters for EMEA of the Whirlpool Corporation. Whirlpool is a company active in the laundry and kitchen industry. We have approximately 69,000 employees worldwide and a revenue of 22 billion. And today I'm responsible for total rewards for the EMEA region, where we have approximately 20,000 employees. And I'm also responsible for the global benefits strategy and supplementary retirement strategy. Now, thanks, Mike, to do the introduction. I was already triggered when you started to talk about generations, because I think it's tricky to use generations to customize your total rewards, but maybe we can move to that in the discussion. Whirlpool is in a journey to really customize our total rewards space for our employees. My first point is, take the right pace if you move forward, right? Because your base needs to be good, right? I gave the example this morning when I joined Italy, the Italy organization. I'm an expert, and it took me 6 months to understand how my retirement plan worked, right? So you already need to start with a good base where you have the full transparency and communication and the right education for your people to understand what exactly they have in the reward space, right? If you have that base ready, you can move to the next step where you really introduce customized flexibility, cafeteria plans where employees truly can choose, right? That's not the only point. I also want to make a point of nudging, right? Because you can give the full flexibility to your employees to choose whatever they want, but it's also our responsibility to nudge employees in the right direction. And think about younger people, they go for cash, but it's important to help them understand that, yes, building up a retirement is important, right? So nudge them in that direction. Also insurances, right? And we learned from, for example, Richard Thaler, that there's a lot of techniques of how we can do that and how we can put even a default setting, right? So you have a life insurance, you can opt out, but the default setting is having one, right? Also health, medical, retirement. I think we need to do both, right? Because the future is flexibility, right? On a lot of angles of the work that we have today, but also taking care of our people and helping them to make the right choices.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so maybe we should not listen too much to what our people say that they want, but actually nudge them in the right direction. That's a very interesting adding to the discussion for sure. The next introducer is Ross, who seems to be in the library of Harry Potter.
Yeah, no magic, and I can talk freely despite it is a virtual background. Hi there, this is Ross coming from another side of the world, based in Hong Kong, coming from Moody's, heads up the compensation benefits for the Asia Pacific region. So maybe I can bring some insight from another perspective. Regarding the flexible rewards, I think both Mike and Pieter talk about benefits. Definitely, it will be the most common part of different cafeteria plan to have different choices be available. I totally agree with Pieter that how can we have a choice be placed or make it available, but whether the individual be able to make the right choice, I think that definitely is the questions. Because according to a survey, for those companies who have adopted flexi benefits in their park, the majority of the employees, they make the choices on day one. The figures told us that 90% of them, they never changed their choice since day one. Not something very good to see. It seems they are making something a default choices from in the very beginning. And also, I would like to perhaps another opportunity for the total rewards is thinking about the cash. It seems the cash or the compensation part consists of different elements. The short-term cash, the base salary, as well as the LTR, the equity. Would that be possible to have the employees to select their own pay mix? Maybe for those risky people, for those aggressive people, they can have a choice to go for a higher variable cash in order to maximize their earning opportunity to offer a lesser guarantee portion. I think that would be another quite interesting part we would like to look at. And also the equity, is it something limited to the executives level, or we would like to make it more available for the different levels of employees? I think APAC, we have companies adopting that strategy. We used to be quite effective as well. So I think that would be another worth exploring point or worth exploring area for us to look at the possibility of leveraging different compensation components in order to have the employees to make their own choices following their needs or their assertiveness or aggressiveness. I think that would be my that would be some of my thought.
Okay, thank you. Interestingly, I always hear you say something about flexibility and customization or personalization of rewards. On the other hand, I hear you all say, or both of you say, so both Pieter and Ross, so we need to nudge people in the right direction, because if you give them default choices, they might stick to what you gave them. And maybe that's also a question that I'm going to read out from John, who said, isn't the use of personas, isn't the use of different personas more associated with customization rather than personalization? Although this might sound very philosophical, but is the use of personas, is that really personalization? I throw the question in the middle, gentlemen.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important philosophical debate. The thing is, how should I say, reward comms has been very traditional, to be blunt, for the last 20-25 years. And it's very much, here are your elements, plain vanilla. We're going to tell you gross net, and we're going to, if you're expat or local national, this is what it looks like. Standard, plain vanilla, and frankly, very boring. Does it land well with every audience? No. Does it land across cultures, languages, countries? No. And having been in 6 different industries, I've seen it's where it frankly doesn't land. And if you think about the topography around HR transformation and everything around the persona of HR in general, it is to some extent persona-led now, rather than just everybody's the same. So shouldn't reward, to be very candid, follow the new hue of what the people function is going towards? rather than just simply having, one plain vanilla total reward statement, and regardless of what age band, where you are in your life journey, this is what it looks like. So I throw that out as a debate. Probably, who knows, maybe my colleagues completely disagree, but at least that's my personal view.
Pieter, Ross? This is Pieter or Ross, so feel free to
yeah,
answer.
happy to jump in, and I'm totally with Mike. I think we need to customize because people are in different phases of their lives, different family situations, so people have different expectations. I'm a bit careful with personas, right? Because how can you truly define them? Also, the whole generation story. I think from scientific research, we know that there's more differences within generations than between generations, and there's maybe even more commonality between dental people that floss their teeth than between generations. So I'm a bit careful with that because there's a lot of marketing behind that also. But I do agree that the future is to be customized and offer options to our employees, and because there's indeed different cultures, different backgrounds, different family situations. So I totally follow with that.
Okay.
I'm with Mike and Pieter that customization is something, I just say that is a trend you cannot skip, because if you are still trying to adopt a very traditional one-size-fits-all approach, then definitely you cannot stand out from the market. You are still spending the same money on your compensation, but receiving less appreciation from your employees, which is not something a company would like to see from a cost effectiveness standpoint. But from an employee perspective, I know that generations or different life stage, it used to be quite common for people to make different choices. But I would like to see if in the future, perhaps, would that be a more analytical and scientific approach to get what exactly your employees are looking for? Because like millennials, like someone in my company versus another one in another company, maybe they're sharing some different needs. Maybe how to grab their needs in order to use it as a base to customize your programs, maybe even can make your program more effective. Because no matter what, I definitely agree that generally speaking, they share some similar needs, but it does to individual levels. Maybe they're looking for different things. So I think that would be something we would like to think about, to cater or to incorporate the input to ask from your employees in order to customize your programs.
Got it. I have a question regarding generations, and I'm asking the people, please feel free to ask more questions. But in the meantime, the question that I have is regarding generations. Now, there was a recent study the last week that said that people from the newest generation, so the people who are recently graduating from universities, that their focus on let's say a sustainable world versus a higher income is not as big as we often think. And I heard Gregor saying today is that a lot of millennials, and for them the environment is getting more important than cash. There's also proof of the opposite, that actually in maybe word of mouth they say it's very important, but when it really comes to cash, that they're actually more interested in that. I would like to have your views on those who just graduated, on newly hires. Do you see a different trend in terms of that less money is traded for more environmental or sustainable policies? Michael, do you want to go first? I see you nodding.
I'm probably not a recent grad. I'm probably on the other end of the spectrum.
No, but you have a vision, of course, on what you see. Do you see people rejecting contracts because of money, or do you see them rejecting an offer and say because your company is not environmental friendly enough?
The former. So let's be blunt about it. We're hitting inflation we haven't seen in 30 years. We've got salary erosion, purchasing power erosion. I can go through a litany of things, right? So the bottom line is, yes, ESG is important, but we've got exogenous events. I won't name them, but we know them. And frankly speaking, I'm in the UK. I've lived, of all the countries I've lived in, everybody is crying out in my company for a mid-year salary adjustment because they've lost their salary erosion. So ESG is one thing, but when what I call the rubber meets the road, people have less money in their pocket to pay their mortgage. That's what they're concerned about today, to be blunt.
Okay. Ross, Pieter?
Yeah,
Let me go. Sorry, Pieter.
please go. No, Ross, your turn.
Ross, please go.
Okay. I definitely share the same view as my core which is cash remains a very core consideration because it's something very objective. You can tell how much you're earning very precisely, but it's difficult to tell how environmental friendly for your company. Of course, you have ESG reporting or whatever, etc. But it is not something easy to assess across different or compare against different companies, and that's why people tend to use those very concrete, very easy to compare salaries as the baseline for them to think about their choices, their career choices, no matter for graduates or for experienced hires. And more importantly, I think one point I would spell out, even though environmental friendly ESG is not a core consideration, but guess what? If you are two companies offering the same salary, of course, the more ESG friendly you are, you will be at a competitive position in beating those talents. But as far as that, it is not still a very core consideration yet, especially for the graduates, because they have their different needs, and also as well as that, salary is still a very easy to compare parameters for those individuals to determine or to make up their mind.
Pieter?
Yeah, I totally agree with both Ross as Mike, and certainly what Mike said. We also see it. We have an overheated job market, inflation, so we monitor even monthly to understand how competitive we still are and what the salary movement expectations are per country, or the forecast to see whether we need to do adjustments. Cash is certainly important. I do see, not only with younger people, but overall, that purpose and the sense of belonging, it becomes very important, or is very important for people. So it's not really, cash, the importance of cash didn't change with having like environmental and sense of belonging and purpose becoming more upfront, right? So it's not or, I would say.
Yeah. Talking about the elephant in the room, which is inflation, I think it's a topic that pops up every now and then in the last 2 days. I talked to international comp and band managers before this, let's say, inflation crisis, and they told me inflation is not my problem. Yeah, in the perception of the employee, it is the case. But if the world changes, you cannot expect from me to compensate for prices. Is there any one of the three of you that thinks like we not necessarily have to compensate for inflation?
I'm happy to go first, right? Because it's a very interesting topic, and it's a daily discussion I have within the organization, and I'm also stepping out, going to the people to talk about it, right? Because inflation has mainly inflation and merit are moving in the same direction, but they have different inputs, right? And by the way, in low inflation years, your merit will be higher than the inflation, right? So that's a reality that we need to be very clear about to our people, right? We've seen the last decades more low inflation, certainly in the Western Europe countries. Now we had higher merit increase, right? The merit increase is driven by the value of a role within a certain location or a country, right? And that's we put a lot of time and effort to understand what the value is for that role. Now, I expect the merit to be higher for next year than what we normally see, right? Because of course, life is becoming more expensive, but I really try to be as open and transparent to our people from, hey guys, look, again, inflation and merit, mostly they move in the same direction, but they have different inputs, right? And we want to be competitive for a specific role in a specific location, and that's how we approach it.
Okay, Ross?
I definitely can't agree more with Pieter, which is considering the good year and the bad years. You cannot just cherry picking to say that for a good year, our merit goes beyond the inflation. It is something, a company liability. When it goes below the inflation, it is a company fault. I think definitely it's a quite market-driven exercise. Especially inflation is a very general index. It doesn't mean your overspending power you have to increase or catch up by the inflation. That would be one of the key points because inflation is an embedded index, but not exactly equivalent to purchasing power. And as a company, I know that it's difficult to get it convinced by individuals, despite there is no contract. You mentioned that the company has to protect your salary not lower than the inflation, but still there are so many individuals thinking of that way. I would like to say there are a couple of approaches I'm thinking of. First of all, why don't you split the money from merit increase from a recurring cost to bonus? In order, no matter retention bonus, no matter performance bonus, in order to minimize the recurring cost pressure from the company, and the individual still can feel the appreciation from the company against your performance. And also, there's another argument that the millennials, they like constant engagement, frequent engagement, and I think there's another trend from a customization perspective. Will we consider not to have merit increase, but more sport increases along with someone doing something good? Say you offer the increase in order. I'm not going to say to dilute the focus or to make things blur, but at least it try to delay the correlation between inflation and the annual exercise. I think annual salary increase exercise. I think that would be another approach from a more flexibility and customization standpoint.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is an area where labor economics and macroeconomics actually come together. So as Pieter rightly mentioned, the inputs have different inputs and different outcomes. So merit and inflation are different for different reasons. What I'm trying to articulate here is pretty simple, is that we're hitting 6, 7, 8% progressive inflation, which we've not seen since the 70s oil shock. So that's pretty massive. When you think about we're the stewards of the highest people costs in the company, so SG&A cost principally is ordained and adjudicated by reward people like us. And every time we have an increase that we put through our payroll, if you then took the sum of the parts for a country and in a sector, that actually increases the inflation as an outcome for a nation state. So in some perverse way, we actually can also perversely impact inflation by what we do. That's happening in America, and that's happening in the UK and Netherlands and Switzerland. So yes, they're different, but they're also, in some perverse way, they are interlinked. So as you think about, all of our finance people are asking us now, what do you predict inflation is going to be in the next 6 to 12 months? Then what will your merit budget be? And then you've got Lloyd's TSB, you've got others that are doing mid-flight increases this month, literally 2% APP. And every other company will look at that in the F team and say, oh, they're doing it, we should do it. So you've got this transitory effect of compoundment in psychology. If somebody does it, then we got to do it. And that's perversely what's going on. It's
self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. But that brings me to another question, is that I spoke to a company the other day and they said the inflation is, let's say, 5% or 8%. So in order to keep purchasing power, we need to increase the salaries with the same amount. But I would like to challenge you on this one. If Pieter makes 100,000 euro a year and I make 50,000, almost all of my spendings are going to stuff that is impacted by inflation. However, Pieter, who is much richer than I am, saves money, and since the interest rates are going up, he's actually saving more due to this crisis. So he's the one partly benefiting from this crisis, whereas I pay the full bill. So my 50,000 euros should be compensated for inflation, but the 100,000 of Pieter not necessarily. Do you agree or disagree with this statement?
I agree with all that, because you remember you've got progressive and different tax rates structures by country. So just saying 50 to 100K has more disposable income is not the simple answer. It's actually depends on the tax rate. But let me shut up and let people reply.
Okay, no, I did this deliberately, so let me have it.
I would like to say it's something from a company perspective. It is something we are measuring, not the absolute differences between the salaries, but the market competitiveness. say the 100,000 meaning a compound ratio of 50%, for example, to a very extreme cases, and that 50,000 to that job is equivalent to a compound ratio of 150. Then it comes to different increment, because from a company perspective, we would like to have those sitting at a lower compound ratio to increase higher, to have receive a high salary in order to stay competitive, and also to slow down those who are sitting high in the compound ratio, because it is not solely thinking about inflation affecting the overall budget, but there are so many things behind the scene, without mentioning the compound ratio and also your performance and potential, whether you're critical job. I think there are so many factors behind the scene determining your increment. Even in a very good year, we have a huge budget. Even some of the individuals are receiving lesser than the others, because not only because of the inflation, but because of the market competitiveness, the compound ratio I mentioned earlier, as well as the performance. There are so many things behind the scene. So it is a apple to orange comparison, I would like to say. That would be my viewpoint.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. Pieter?
No, I totally agree with my two colleagues. Maybe adding from our perspective, how we try to solve it is where we felt in the market that the value of a role that we missed, we tried to fix it with targeted merit increases. So really look to targeted employees that we gave an additional increase to make sure that we followed the trend. So you're totally right, just like 1% for everyone would not be a fair thing to do today. And again, things are so volatile and so unpredictable that we also need to be very cautious of how to move forward with this.
Although I do like to add, or maybe I'm making the same point again, but let's say the impact of inflation is not the same for every income bracket, and the lower you come into the income bracket, the more the impact most of the time is, because most of your spending are actually going to stuff that is inflation related. And indeed, we can debate on where how to calculate that, and given taxes, it's a bit more complex than I said. So it's time for everybody. I would like to have your last minute, your one remark that you would like to make. Is there one thing, one tip, one advice that you can give to your colleagues to end this discussion on the personalization of rewards? Let's do in the reversed order. So Ross, can you give your last 30 seconds of fame?
No assumptions. That would be my keyword. Maybe we are assuming that people knows how things work. People knows what will be the right choice. People knows how to select the flexi benefits, or how to customize their own rewards. But the answer, but usually speaking, the answer is no. You have to think about how as a HR or as a reward guy, how can you facilitate your employee to make a good choice in order to utilize the full potential of a customized reward program.
Never assume anything. Thank you, Pieter.
I like that, never assume. Thanks, Ross. Now, I was just reflecting also, think about all the startups and scale-ups with crazy creative benefits and perks. We don't need to compete with those groups. I think it's important as multinational that if you change, you take your time and you listen to your people. You make sure that they feel involved in the changes that you make. And you take the right pace where you move with transparency and open communication of what you're doing, and add enough education that people understand what exactly the choice is that you're offering.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I was at World of Work recently in Atlanta, and one of my good friends, Steve Brink, who's the CEO of UFlex, made an opening remark, which I think really resonated to this question. So when you go to Starbucks, right, and you try to buy a Frappuccino, that same Frappuccino has probably 20 different modalities. And I guess that this is really about rewards. So rather than us trying to tell our clients what they want, I think we should think the opposite. You got reward, but then they come in so many different flavors and twists, and sugar and no sugar, milk, no milk. So my point is, let's actually think the other way around. What does the customer want? And it may be 20 different modalities, and we have to be able to equip our ecosystem to deliver those 20 different modalities, if I can put it that way.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for this final statement of all three. Let me thank Pieter, Mike, and Ross, coming from different parts in the world. I think different continents, different countries, different views, but ultimately I think it adds to understanding where this whole field is going to. Thank you so much for this contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.